In October of 2011, a seasoned park ranger named Alistair Finch was conducting his final patrol of a remote sector in Washington's Cascade Mountains before the winter snows made the area inaccessible. During that patrol, he stumbled upon a campsite that had been abandoned so suddenly. A pot of coffee was still warm over the dying embers of a fire. The family of 4 who had been staying there were never seen again. What Alistair found on their discarded video camera has never been officially released, and the case remains one of the most disturbing unsolved disappearances in the state's history. Alistair had been a ranger for over 20 years. He was a quiet, sturdy man who was more comfortable with the company of ancient pine trees than with people. He knew the sounds, smells, and rhythms of the forest better than he knew his own heartbeat. Station 7 was his territory, a rugged, beautiful, and deeply isolated part of the park that saw few visitors even in the height of summer. By late autumn, it was a ghost land. His job was simple: patrol the trails one last time, make sure no hikers were stranded, and lock up the access gates until spring. The day started like any other. The air was crisp and cold, carrying the clean, sharp scent of pine and damp earth. The forest was a riot of fall colors, and a thick layer of fog clung to the valleys below. Alistair felt a sense of peace on these final patrols, a quiet satisfaction in seeing the forest prepare for its long winter sleep. But on this day, the quiet felt different. It felt heavier. The first sign that something was wrong was small. About 5 miles into his patrol, on a trail that was barely more than a deer track, he found a child's toy. A small, brightly colored plastic dinosaur. It was half buried in the mud, but it looked new. It was strange. This trail was miles from any designated campsite, not a place a family with a small child would likely be. He picked it up, a tiny piece of unnatural color in the vast green and brown wilderness, and slipped it into his pocket, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. A few hours later, the unease grew. He started noticing strange carvings on the trees. They weren't the usual hearts and initials left by thoughtless hikers. These were complex geometric symbols, almost like circuit boards, gouged deep into the bark. They were fresh. He ran his fingers over one, the edges still sharp, sticky with sap. He'd never seen markings like these before. They weren't from any local tribe, and they had a strange, unsettling precision to them. They felt like a warning. As the afternoon light began to fade, he heard a sound on the wind. It was a faint, rhythmic clicking, almost like 2 stones being tapped together. Click-clack, click-clack. He stopped and listened, scanning the dense woods around him. It was probably just a woodpecker, he told himself, or a loose branch knocking in the wind. But the sound was too regular, too deliberate. It would stop for a few minutes, then start again, seeming to come from a different direction each time. He was nearing the end of his route when the smell hit him. It was acrid and chemical, the scent of burnt plastic or electronics, and it completely overpowered the natural smell of the forest. It was a deeply wrong smell to find this far from civilization. Following the scent, he pushed through a thicket of ferns and found himself standing at the edge of a small, unauthorized clearing. In the center of the clearing was a campsite, and it was the most unnerving scene he had ever witnessed. A large family-sized tent stood fully erect, its flap open and fluttering in the breeze. 4 camp chairs were arranged around a fire pit, where the embers still glowed a dull orange. A pot of coffee sat on a grill over the fire, a thin wisp of steam still rising from its spout. Sleeping bags were unrolled inside the tent. A half-eaten bag of marshmallows sat on a log. A wallet and a set of car keys were on one of the chairs. A smartphone lay face down in the dirt. It was as if a family of 4 had been sitting there 1 second and had simply evaporated the next. There were no signs of a struggle, no animal tracks, just a scene of perfect, peaceful domesticity, abandoned in an instant. Alistair immediately radioed it in, his voice tight and strained as he described the scene. His supervisor told him to stay put and not to touch anything. A search and rescue team was on its way, but it would be hours before they could reach his position. As darkness began to fall, the clicking sound started again, closer this time. Click, clack, click, clack. It seemed to be coming from the trees all around him. Fighting a rising tide of panic, Alistair decided to do a quick search of the immediate area. His flashlight beam cut nervously through the deepening gloom. That's when he saw it, lying in a pile of leaves about 20 feet from the campsite. A small, consumer-grade video camera. It was caked in mud, but it seemed intact. He picked it up. The battery light was blinking, almost dead. He pressed the play button. The first few clips were exactly what you'd expect. A smiling family, a man, a woman, and 2 young children setting up their tent, laughing as they roasted marshmallows. The father, a man named David Miller, according to the wallet, narrated their adventure. But as Alistair skipped through the files, the tone changed. The clips became shorter, filmed later in the day. The family looked nervous, their smiles gone. In one clip, David is filming the trees, whispering, "Did you hear that? It's that sound again." Then Alistair got to the last file. The timestamp was from less than an hour before he had found the camp. The footage was dark and shaky. The camera was on the ground, pointing up at the canopy of trees overhead. You could hear the terrified, hushed whispers of the family. "It's right there," the mother whispers. "Oh my God, what is it?" The clicking sound was loud, sharp, and seemed to be coming from directly above them. The camera shook violently as the young son started to cry. "Shh," David whispered desperately. "Don't make a sound." And then something dropped from the trees into the frame. It wasn't an animal, it was a person, but it moved with a horrifying insect-like speed, landing silently on all fours. It was clad in dark, ragged clothing, and its limbs were long and thin. It crawled towards the camera, its head twitching from side to side. And its face was covered by a crude, ill-fitting mask, made from pale birch bark, with a grotesque, unblinking smile painted on it in black pitch. The thing paused, its masked face tilting as if it was listening. Then it lunged towards the camera. The footage cut to black amidst a cacophony of screams. Alistair dropped the camera as if it were on fire. He stumbled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His mind was reeling, trying to process the impossible thing he had just seen. He fumbled for his flashlight, shining it wildly into the trees around him. Click-clack. The sound was right above his head. His blood turned to ice. Slowly trembling, he raised the flashlight beam, pointing it up into the high, dark branches of the ancient pine tree he was standing under. And there, crouched on a thick branch like some monstrous bird of prey, was a figure. All he could see was the glint of 2 eyes and, just below them, the pale, white curve of a smiling birch bark mask. It tilted its head, and the clicking sound echoed again in the dead, silent forest. Alistair didn't scream. The sound was trapped in his throat. He just ran. He ran blindly through the dark woods, branches whipping at his face, his lungs burning. He didn't look back. He ran until he burst out of the woods and onto a service road, where he collapsed, sobbing and incoherent. The search and rescue team found him there an hour later. They searched the area for weeks. They never found the Miller family. They never found the video camera Alistair had dropped. They found nothing but an empty campsite. The official report listed the family's disappearance as a probable animal attack, despite the lack of any evidence. Alistair retired a month later, a broken man. He never spoke in detail about what he saw in that forest or on that camera, but locals in the small towns bordering the park still tell stories. They say that if you hike deep enough into the woods, you can sometimes hear a strange clicking sound, and they warn you to never ever stay in the forest after dark, because some things, they say, have been there a very long time, and they don't like to be found.